What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Flow Presents as we are about to talk about what it means to be Black, to be Christian. Is it either or is it both? And I'm excited to get into this conversation with our panelists today. We're not going to hesitate. We're not going to wait too much longer. So let's get right to this. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another Flow Presents. I appreciate you guys taking this time out to talk with us, chop it up. And here's my opening question for you. Here's my opening salvo. I want you to finish this statement using the sentence starter, I am. So I'm gonna throw it to you, Jansen, first. I am.
I am Jansen. Maybe I missed a bit of the intro, but yeah, I am Jansen. I am a man, I am a Christian, and I am Black and I'm proud.
I am Jansen. I am a man. I am Christian. I am Black, and I'm proud. I appreciate you sharing that. All right, Simone, you next. I am.
I am Simone. I am an educator. I am a Jamaican. I'm Black, and I'm proud of it.
All right, I am Simone, Jamaican, Black, and proud of it. Educator, I'm sorry, an educator, Jamaican, Black, and proud of it. Okay, Philip, I am.
Hey, everybody. So I am part of a chosen people. I am a peculiar person. I am Phil.
Part of a peculiar people, a chosen person. I am Phil. And Miss Jones, I am.
Hi, I am Courtney. I am a Black Christian woman.
I am Courtney. I'm a Black Christian woman. I thank you, Courtney. I think that's the perfect transition into really the meat of our topic today. We posed the idea and the thought on Facebook, and my team talked about it. Does it matter whether you are Black first or Christian first? Should there be a determination between the two? And a few of you actually mentioned both. Actually, yeah, except for Philip, I believe, who I think chose a different way to word it. A few of you mentioned both of those aspects of identity, Black and Christian. Does it matter which one that you are first? Let's get real deep into it. So does it matter which one presents first? Courtney, you said I am a Black Christian woman. Can you tell us about why you chose those three things?
I think for me, those are the three strongest identities that I align myself with. As far as the sequence of those words, I think that means less to me than the meaning of those words and how they intersect. I don't hold one of those higher than the other or lower than the other. I think they all inform the greatest parts of me. And I think to kind of like number them is just not an accurate picture of who I am.
Okay, Courtney, if I heard you right, for all of those things best describe you, as you're saying, but the sequence for you doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you were to say, I am a woman who is Christian and Black. But I do find it interesting that you did start off by saying Black Christian woman. But I'm hearing you that you say it doesn't matter the order or the sequence, you feel all those things describe you. What about you, Jansen? You said that you are a Jansen Black Christian man. Tell me, what made you decide those things? Does it matter? Does sequence for you matter?
Yeah, I don't think the sequence matters. I mean, I even though I was kind of, I don't want to say taken back by the question, but my initial reaction was I'm Jansen. And so ultimately, I identify, there's so many ways that so many intersectionalities between whether it's faith, whether it's culture, because I didn't even get into the culture like Simone did, but there's so many aspects that make up the composite of who I believe I am individually. And for this topic, in terms of your, ethnic origin versus one's faith perspective, I don't think either one of those two have to lead first. I mean, ultimately, we are all children of God. So I would say on a broader level, maybe that's the more important one. Like, yes, we are children. I am a child of God. And then from there, all the other aspects of my identity, I think they flow. So the sequence is not really critical to me. It's the fact that both of them are part of my identity.
Okay, so you also, it sounds to me that you're like Courtney by saying, I stated those things because they're probably the dominant aspects of who you are when asked in the spot. But for you, the sequence doesn't matter. They are what make up Jansen. So it's actually interesting. You did start off by saying, I am Jansen. And then it's almost like, and if you want to know who Jansen is, he is then these are three things that can describe him. Maybe not all,
Correct.
the three of them that can describe him.
Correct.
Sharing that for me. Simone, let's go to you next.
Repeat the question for me, please.
Does the sequence of how you described yourself matter? You chose a few things. Did you choose them in any particular order? Do they all compile you?
Yeah, I mean, knowing what we're looking at today, I definitely was I made sure to mention being Black, but to me that is most important. Unlike some of the other characteristics that I mentioned, and even about Christianity, those are not things that a person can see from me walking down the street. But being Black, especially being Black in America, is the first thing that people see. So a Black female, before they know if I'm educated, before they know that I'm an educator, or a teacher, or that I'm Jamaican from the Bronx or any other things, they see that I'm Black and they see that I'm a female. So those are very important characteristics for me, and go before everything else.
Okay, you style something that Phil, if you wouldn't mind talking to, you feels that other people are going to see you as Black first, and therefore you incorporate that in there. Phil, I'm wondering, does it matter how other people see you? Does that have an impact on how you choose to identify?
No, I mean, it shouldn't. It shouldn't impact the way that you identify who you are. But I do think that sequence is important. Before the creation or the construction of race and religion, God already told us who we were. But I think that we kind of get that mixed up with what people see me as today when I walk outside. And then we also try to separate ourselves from what God says we are based on our religion or our faith. But I think before any of that existed, God already told us that that we are His chosen people, and that once we choose to believe that, then that's who we are. Otherwise, we're going to get our identities confused with our political stances or who we associate with, what our culture is, and things of that nature.
So it sounds like all of you all are saying in some way, shape, or form that it really shouldn't matter what sequence you put those statements in. They all comprise who you are. And yet Phil acknowledges, and correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, that yeah, the world is going to do that someone a little bit. They're going to see you as a particular thing. But before all of that, I believe Phil and Jansen, you were saying, like, I'm a child of God for those of the Christian faith. Yet when I posted this question on Facebook, I want to read to you guys some of the answers that we heard, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. This one is from Rhea Moffitt. She says, perhaps we have a choice in how we identify, but the world 100% sees Blackness first, since Christianity isn't visible. But there are definitely struggles that come from being a Black Christian that don't come from being just Black or just Christian. If you guys internalize that question, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Simone, I think I saw you nodding ahead a little bit. Would you mind kind of sharing your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. Excuse me. I mean, I understand what Phil is saying as well in regards to being a peculiar people, but I live in a place where the color of my skin matters. I also posted on the same thing. If I were in Jamaica, I wouldn't have to talk about being Black. I'm just Jamaican, and that's the end of the story. But I'm living in a place where my Blackness does matter. And I think to not acknowledge that is almost doing myself a disservice. There are also, as the person posted, certain issues that come with being a Christian and being Black. Yeah, I can see how that is. Some people feel that as Blacks we shouldn't be Christians. They feel it is a white man's religion that was imposed on us. I don't really agree with that stance, but some people have issues with us as Black Christians. We shouldn't identify as such. It's not a religion. It's not a religion for us. So I can see that argument, but I also completely understand what the person on Facebook was saying, the comment that was made, that separate and together there are some issues with it.
Okay, so you kind of see where they're coming from. You also pointed out the need to emphasize being Black because you are in America. And also, and to that point, I want to hear from you, Jansen. Does it matter how you identify if you are a Black Christian, particularly in America? Does it matter which one you state first? Whether you say, hey, I'm a Christian Black man, or whether I'm a Black Christian man, does that matter just because you live in these here United States?
No, so here in America, yes, you walk out the house, you're viewed as Black. Depending on where you are, if you're in a majority Black jurisdiction, then it may not have as much. That may not be the thing that may be the thing between life and death. Whereas in certain other parts of the country, Minneapolis, for example, or in certain parts of Georgia, if you're out taking a jog, like they're seeing you based on the history of this country, based on all of the inaccurate stereotypes that have been perpetuated for centuries. They're seeing that, and before they even know who you are as an individual, yeah, they're making judgments, value judgments based off of the color of your skin. So and then your makeup. So on a very real level, if you're asking about how I identify myself, that's different versus how the world in America particularly sees you. But like I was telling you a couple sessions ago, I think when you start to view yourself outside of just those parameters, that's when you start to have a certain level of liberation. And I think, to Simone's point, when you look at liberation theology within the Black community, I think that's where you start to understand why some people they still subscribe to the Christian faith, even though that was the faith that was used to enslave you, because it's actually powerful. So hopefully we can get to that a bit later.
Yeah, I'll kind of go through that. Courtney, I'd love to hear your thoughts. In brief, I know a lot of Black Americans, educated Black Americans, particularly those who come from HBCUs, look at Christianity as being a ridiculous religion for Black people to ascribe to, kind of what Jansen said. If you have any knowledge on that or around that topic, had that changed? Does that influence how you define yourself?
I think it could. I can be honest and say I do not have enough knowledge about the history of it to speak to it. But I do think it just becomes kind of like a slippery slope when we do talk about separating different parts of your identity, because it makes me think of a quote from Tarana Burke, the leader of the Me Too movement. And she would always say, like, if you can't see me, you can't hear me. So if we are saying that in this space I am Black first, or in this space I'm Christian first, I think we're ignoring all of the intersections of that inform why we do go to this place to worship, why we worship this way, and the ways in which the world treats us. So I think if we continue to just say, this is what I prioritize, I think it leaves a lot of people who have those extra identities, whether it's LGBT or disabled or a woman or anything like that. I think it leaves those populations more vulnerable to be ignored in terms of the issues that they face.
Wow, I appreciate you sharing that. By choosing one or the other, you potentially negate all the other aspects of self that integrate to make you who you are. I think that's what I'm hearing from you. I appreciate that. Phil, before going to you, I want to read another post. Someone said on the same thread, "You're Black first. You can change your religious affiliation at any time. And some people use religious affiliations to justify who they are, yet don't uphold some of the basic points, like the way you treat people, etc." Phil, I see you nodding your head. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Jansen, I'm coming right to you afterwards too.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically a lot of, I think what I was saying last week is that we've got a whole bunch of Christians out here, but in some cases, Christians have weaponized the Bible to colonize and to use all kind of adverse actions against other people. And in other cases, we have people that kind of just go about their daily lives, but don't espouse the principles of the Bible. So what are you? That's my question. What are you really? I think there's a reason why when we read the Bible, we don't hear or see Jesus, rather, describing himself as Jesus from Nazareth. Other people may have done that, but he never went around saying, "Yo, that's my hood. Like I'm Jesus from Nazareth." Like he never did that. Instead, rather, he said that I'm the Son of God. And I think that that's a significant difference. I think that we need to take a closer look at why Jesus said that, and does that take precedent over what hood you come from, or what your culture is, or what your skin color might be, or even religious affiliation?
I appreciate you talking about that, but let's look at where we are right now. But most of us on the panel, except for Courtney, are Seventh-day Adventists, and we live in a society right now that is currently under a type of civil unrest. Black persons in America are tired of being mistreated. That includes Black Christian persons. Yet, there are some churches, church affiliations that have been silent in response to this, because their demographic is made up not just of Black people, have chosen to respond in a particular way, which I can imagine might make me want to identify first as being Black if identified as being Christian meant that I am silent, if you're following me. Like there are some churches who are like, well, it's important, but the Christian response has got to be one that is calm, and we've got to make sure to, and fill in the blank, which as a Black person sometimes makes me feel dismissed. So I'm wondering from that lens, does it matter, Phil? Is it important for me to then say, no, I am Black first and then a Christian after? I'm gonna start with you, Phil, and then I'm gonna move on to you, Jansen.
I just don't agree with the line of thinking that I have to be Black first and then Christian, or I have to be Christian first and then Black. Like none of that really matters, because what Jesus did on the earth was to promote his kingdom and all of the principles that he created, that are just and fair and noble and all of that. So I understand what the church is doing when they come out, or even organizations when they come out and say we're with the Black Lives Matter movement. I appreciate that, but at the same time, whether I'm Black or I'm Christian doesn't necessarily come first for me when I'm talking about these issues, because I can talk about them from any standpoint. Yeah, I'm Black, and I'm also a believer in Christ. So I should be able to talk about injustice anywhere, no matter who it's happening to, or where it's happening.
Okay, appreciate it. Jansen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just feel like that sentiment kind of ignores reality a bit. I mean, I think that, again, Armand could have been like, you know what, Jesus is my personal savior. I love rocking with Jesus, but he was killed because he was a Black man. He was killed because he was a Black man in America that has a history of this type of systemic injustice. So I think when you kind of like disassociate yourself, I think it's problematic, particularly when you look at even the history of Christianity in America. I mean, the reason we are disappointed by these faith institutions over and over again is because you have to understand this is a religion that was used as dogma for justifying slavery. You know, what is it? The descendants of Ham, and then they peddled this theology, and so you have these slaves that were crossing the Middle Passage, that were living oppressed in this society. And I mean, let's be real, that Jesus of Nazareth was very much a Jesus for the white man. So I understand from a historical context when, like, you know, people like the Nation of Islam would bang on Christianity. But I think even the people from the Nation of Islam miss a very powerful point, that slaves, disenfranchised Black people in America found in Jesus, or in the Bible, they found a savior who suffered with them. They found a God who operated and moved for the oppressed. This was a guy that freed his people from Israel. This was a God that often fought for the people who were subjugated. I see my time is up, so I'm going to stop talking, but I think that is why the faith that many people of African descent have, it's like I don't want to say it's a more like visceral, or more like it's a powerful faith, because they realize, like, look, this is not that Jesus, that blue-eyed, blonde hair, like, you know, turn the other cheek Jesus. This is the Jesus who turned over tables, and this is the Jesus who fought for you. This is the Jesus who tried to end suffering. Like, that's the Jesus that I think many Black Christians identify with. And if you identify with that Jesus, then you then have to have an orientation where you're pushing for social justice, because it becomes a part of that Jesus that you follow.
Okay. I want you to pinhole that, Phil. I saw your hand.
Yeah.
I got a comment from YouTube that I really want to get to, and I want to push that to Courtney. Do you believe that prioritizing a particular identity happens sometimes when there is conflict between those identities? Do you believe your identities ever conflict? And I want to ask the ladies this, particularly because we know historically women are considered second, right? If you are a woman, you are second to a man. If you are a Black woman, you are third, because you came after, well, shoot, fourth, man, because you came after a white woman, Black man, and then came Black woman. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. And it's up on the screen if you guys want to see it. Do you believe that prioritizing a particular identity happens sometimes when there is conflict between your identities?
That's me.
Yeah, Courtney, if you could.
Okay. Yeah, all the time. I think especially in the church. I was watching a live stream with a pastor last week, and he said something to the effect of, now the world knows what it's like to live every day as a Black man. And this is a pastor that I follow, and I'm just like, well, Black men aren't the only ones being targeted, for one. And I get that he was coming from his own perspective in that. But I think just to center Black men in this moment is a big portion of their problem that a lot of women face when we do try and separate identities and not consider every facet of Black people, because Black men aren't the only ones that are affected by things like this. So I think in that way, it's just something that people of multiple identities have to consistently face every day. So yeah, I think it's a constant issue.
Appreciate you sharing that. Simone, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Courtney that there are sometimes conflicts in our identity, how we identify, which one basically gets preference at the moment. I think there are situations where one identity does have to go to the forefront. As a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, you know, I remember a pastor some years ago saying that it should be Christian Seventh-day Adventists, because that's what should come first as a follower of Christ. Being SDA is just a denomination. But then even before the Christianity, especially at this point, is my Blackness. Like that, for me, that supersedes everything else. And just to go back a bit to what Phil was saying, I understand what you're saying, Phil, but I have to respectfully disagree. To not acknowledge my color at this point in America, I think it's to kind of say it's not important. I could say I'm a child of God, I'm living a Christ-like character, but when I walk out on the street, my Blackness is what's seen. Every time my brother gets in a car, if he rolls by police, they're seeing a Black man in a vehicle. And to not acknowledge that is to say it's not important, or what's happening isn't real. My time's up.
Yeah, Phil, I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, so I won't, it's not necessarily a response to Simone per se, but to the question, or rather, I'll rebut to what has been said. It's not a disassociation for me when it comes to being Black or anything else. I completely acknowledge that I am Black and that the world sees me as Black every time I step out of the house. But what I'm saying is that there's a higher calling that I have to live up to, and that is being a child of God. And there are certain principles that is attached to that responsibility that this world just doesn't recognize. And so there are conflicts that I think humans create when we start labeling ourselves as Black, as woman, or like Black man, Black woman, like all of those stuff. Of course it matters. Like, we struggle nonetheless. But I was talking to a friend in South Africa, and she was saying that today, although it wasn't always like this, but today, the majority or the laws are really for Black people in South Africa. And so it's sort of the inverse of what happened here, what's going on here in America, where in South Africa, white people are mistreated. If a white person kills a Black person, they're gonna get the blunt of the law and everything else that comes as a consequence. So it's like, all right, now do I say that white lives matter in that situation? Or should I just fight for justice and equality anywhere and everywhere for everybody? So in essence, what I'm saying is I'm not disassociating from my identity as a Black man here in America, because that is my reality. If I lived in any other century, like in the 14th century, it would probably be different. But justice and equality still is what we're fighting for, nonetheless.
Okay. All right. But let's kind of dig. Jansen, you got something? Because I got a question for y'all. Because what I find interesting about this topic, right, is that identity, and you guys have all loosely talked about this. Identity is about putting people into boxes, it's labels, etc. But the reality is, because there are so many things that also make us similar as well as make us different, we try to distinguish ourselves one from the next. Those in power had the power to determine what were the distinguishing factors, i.e. the word Black. I wouldn't have chosen Black. I am a beautiful chocolate brown. But the reality is they had the power to label us Black. And with that came a certain understanding of what it meant to be Black, because they defined it as such. So I want to make sure we understand that identity is something that is conscious, is something that we have to choose, and it also can be something that's forced. As you guys said before, you walk outside and you are seen Black. You may not identify as Black. I mean, that's something we talk about in the Black community. Let's be honest. We say, oh, that person ain't Black, because they are not doing things that are ascribed to what it means to be Black. So I'm asking you all now, looking at where the nation is, does it matter really how you communicate yourself to others? Because even in doing so, you're going to let them know where you stand on a particular issue. So if you say you're a Christian Black man, someone's going to take that as information to say, oh, okay, I know where they stand potentially, as opposed to saying that you're a Black Christian. Jansen, look like you got something to say, and I go to Simone. I see you afterwards, nodding your head.
Well, I always have something to say. I just think there's a danger with, not that anyone's going to end up sounding as ridiculous as like Candace Owens, but like I just think there's a danger when you just, in everything, I don't care what it has to do with race, if it has to do with culture, if it has to do with like economics, everything requires an understanding of history. And you've heard me say this before, Sankofa, one must look back to understand where one is going. And if we fail to do that in the case of the African-American experience in America, then that's where you start to have this situation where there's a disjoint between one's identity and one's faith. I mean, one's faith is the orientation in which you see the world and how you react to the sufferings in the world. That's one's faith. And I know many Muslims that are more pious than many people that label themselves Christian or even think they're peculiar like Adventists. Like I know many righteous people from many faith backgrounds and some that don't even profess to have a faith background. But the history of America, the history of Black people in America, I mean, it's so tough. It is so hard, and it's so that's why there were centuries of putting Black people down, and then now in the past 50 years, it was a conscious decision to, you know what, Black is beautiful. My hair that you despise is beautiful. My skin that you despise and somehow tried to make it seem like it was inferior, that's beautiful. So I think on some level, on a very real level, like we have to affirm and accept and embrace that identity and embrace it wholeheartedly, particularly here in America. Because like Simone said, if I was in Barbados, it's like, oh, you Bajan, you Guyanese or what? Like, but that's irrelevant here. You could be West African or Caribbean, but you step off that boat, step off that plane, like you're Black with all of the stuff that comes with it.
Okay, let me get Simone inside here, and I want to ask everyone a question after this. Because Simone, I saw you nodding. What are your thoughts?
No, man, it's been so much. I kind of actually lost my train of thought. I've just been nodding along to Jansen, so I'm agreeing with him, and we can move on. Ask the next question. Maybe I'll respond to that.
What, you got any thoughts, Courtney, you want to share before we kind of shift on? That'd be it.
No, I was just thinking, based on what Jameson was saying, it may also be, well, one, I do think it's also highly contextual, based on both Simone and Jansen's comments. Like you said, if I'm in Jamaica, I may not have to say that I'm Black. If I am at a women's conference and everyone is relating to me because we are all women and we have that shared experience, I may not have to strongly affirm that I am a woman. But that also made me think that perhaps for some people, it may be that they attach certain identities that they're saying to affirm that to people, so that it's more of like a, don't you forget that this is who I am, as opposed to them imposing like a sequence or a power on it. So yeah, that's it.
I appreciate that. And I think that is surmising what was said before. And I want to highlight what Jansen said is a lot of our identities can shape how we view the world. Right? If you are a Christian, that shapes how you view the world, right? If you are a Buddhist, that shapes how you view the world. I would also say that is said, that could be said about your racial identity, right? If you're Black, you view the world a particular way. If you're white, you view the world a particular way. So again, and I just want us to for our audience, I'm not trying to beat this dead horse, does that, to then Courtney's point, does that then matter when you communicate that to someone else? Like, if a white person comes to me and says, hey, I am a white Christian, I think that communicates something very specific to me. If they say that they're a Christian, that communicates something specific to me because I already see that they're white. I see you, Jason, come on after. But what if they were to say, hey, I am a conscious white male, recognizing that my privilege impacts the world around me? Sounds ridiculous, but it lets me know more about their identity and therefore informs how I communicate with them. You see what I'm saying? So I'm wondering, does it matter then how we choose to identify or label that identity, Jansen?
I mean, I guess I'd rather respond to your question. I mean, if someone's walking around like, hey, I'm an ally, that's that. Now we starting to verge on the, I don't want to say corniness. Like, I don't need people like bending the knee, kissing my shoe. I don't need people saying, guess what, Jansen, in a meeting, send me a note. I'm an ally. Like, I mean, I don't want that or need that. But I think going back to the broader question that this whole topic about it on identity, I mean, even the good book that we Christians adhere to is very clear on identity. I mean, when Moses went to free the people of Israel, he wasn't like, hey, Pharaoh, let my people go, talking about just all of humanity in this generic level. No, it's let these descendants of Joseph, let them go. When God is, when he brought them into the promised land, he's literally setting them apart, saying, don't bang with these people, don't bang with these people, stay away from don't worship their God. There's always been this whole thing of identity, of tribe. Even within the nation of Israel, you had the Levites, and you had the 12 tribes of Israel. Like, and there was identity within that. Like, there's nothing wrong. And I will vehemently always say there's nothing wrong with identity. It's when that identity, when you use that identity to become, to make someone else feel subservient, inferior, or to have some level of superiority, even within the Christian faith, when Adventists are like, I'm peculiar, we're the chosen, we're the remnant. No, like, God said the rocks will cry out. Like, so there are many people that are remnants, that are chosen, that are peculiar. So,
Phil, I see you nodding your head. I think what Jansen's pointing out is this idea that within labeling becomes this practice of oppression, regardless of where you are. Like, you choose to label yourself in a manner that will put you above some other people because you don't want to be below because of, world history. What are your thoughts about that, Phil?
Yeah, that's exactly, I guess, in short, what I've been trying to say this whole time. I guess I should have just let you talk. But yeah, no, I mean, when we create these labels, we have to look at what's the significance of them. Is it just to make myself feel a part of a group and exclude other people? Am I identifying who I am so that I can create laws to oppress others? Like, what is the point? That's what I'm trying to get us to look at as a whole. What is the purpose of these labels, or what are the purpose of these labels that we place on ourselves? If they're not seeking to do good and be fair, then, and seek peace among everybody, then why do we have these labels, or why do we adhere to them?
So to everyone on this call, and I'd like to start off again with you, Courtney, how do you then navigate this world, right? Where labels are out and about. I mean, and we continue to make labels because of the continued emerging identities that we see about. I've heard the joke LGBTQIABC, but the reality is those letters cover different persons who identify differently. So to us, where Christian means something, Black means something, I kind of hear you guys saying, well, it shouldn't matter, but how do we navigate this world then, Courtney? If you have any solutions for us, and I see you, Simone, come right after.
I think for me, what I'm thinking of right now is maybe I need to approach, when someone comes or expresses their identities to me, maybe I need to approach it with more of like a critical lens of why are they choosing to use these words to describe themselves in this moment, or why are they choosing not to describe themselves that way, or even maybe be more reflective myself about when I choose to identify it in a certain way, why I'm doing it in that moment. So I think that's something that might be helpful and kind of help quell some of the differences that people feel about the topic, just thinking more critically about why people are choosing certain identities at a certain point in time.
I hear you. I think it's a means of communication, conscious or otherwise. Simone, your thoughts?
I agree with Courtney. I think context is very important, and the context in which we are relating with an individual. It is not every situation that I walk into that I need to say that I'm Black, or I need to say that I'm a woman. I think as individuals, when we meet someone, depending on where we meet them, the conversation that's surrounding our interaction, the first thing that they say is what's going to stick with us. If somebody walks up to you and says, I'm a gay Seventh-day Adventist. Why did you have to why was gay put first? Is that because you want us to know that that is how you identify? I think the identifier tends to be the first thing that comes out of our mouths. So in this situation, what's happening right now in America, being Black is very important. If I go to other countries, if you may find that it's not about color, but it's more so about class, right? Or your social status. So people may identify with where they live, right? Because of the type of people who live there, the economic status of people who live in that area, as more so than about their color. Or they, identify with the car that they drive. They belong to a certain car club, or they belong to a certain social club, because that is the identifier for them. So I think context is very important.
I like that. I think we're going to push the conversation there. Jansen, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to, so I agree wholeheartedly with Simone, and I think we have to be very clear. So tribe matters. I mean, throughout all of humanity, people have found the best way to survive is to by finding people that have similar whatever, whether it's a similar orientation, whether it's faith, whether it was just the way they all hunted, the way they all did this. Like, people have always survived via tribes. And I think now when you have people saying Black Lives Matter, when you have people identifying as like, look, I am LGBTQ plus, I am pansexual, I am X, Y, and Z. Like, these are all things that people, they're finding their tribe where they find a place of security, a place of safety, because ultimately they're trying to, but all I hear when I hear that is that they're looking for everyone else to recognize their inherent humanity, their inherent dignity, and their inherent equality. And I think if we were in a country, if we that had a history of recognizing those things, then they wouldn't be as important. But because this history is founded by taking indigenous people's land, subjugating people for several hundred years, and just believing the whole myth of white man's destiny, then that is why your identity as a woman, as someone as a person of color, as someone that's not coming from the traditional normative of white male in power, like, that's why these labels matter. And that's why, yes, Black Lives Matter. And that's why we identify as Black. And I think our faith reconciles with that desire for justice.
I actually like a lot of what you said just now. We're going to have to dig deep into that context, because I think that's really going to push this conversation in a new direction. Also want to read something from YouTube for you all. It says, is refusing to identify ourselves as Black Christians or Black first in some ways oppressive? I see a lot of shaking heads. Let me go to Phil. Let me hear from you. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So refusing to identify as a Black Christian or Black first is oppressive. That's what they're saying, in essence.
Yeah, if you don't say that you're a Black Christian or Black, let me make sure I'm saying this, or Black first, yeah, in any way, is that oppressive?
I don't know how. I mean, how is that oppressing? Are you oppressing yourself, or are you oppressing other people? Because in order to oppress others, you'd have to have some kind of power. You'd have to have some sort of majority economically, politically,
Okay.
in order to oppress somebody else. So I'm just not understanding the question entirely.
So what I'll do is I'll put it back to our YouTube commenter if they want to explain their
Unless I see Jansen looks like he might be able to explain it.
No, I think I understand the sentiment in what the person's saying. It's like, again, if someone has told you that being short is the worst, and then you've internalized this thing where it's like, oh man, I'm short, therefore I am less. Or, oh, black is less, then when you fail to say, you know what, I'm a proud black person, like I think that person is insinuating like maybe there's a level of
internalized oppression.
Yeah, mental slavery. I mean, that's how Brother Bob would describe it. Like by not, and I think that's what the person can clarify themselves more, but that's how I take it. Like you failed to say, you know what, I'm black and I'm proud, or I think my black is beautiful or whatever, then you might be on some Candace Owen trajectory.
Poor Candace. Simone, I saw you had a finger up.
No, poor Candace. She deserves everything.
She deserves no kind of none, zero.
She deserves it all. But if from what I get from the question, they're asking, is it some ways oppressive? I don't think so. Again, it goes back to, I think, context. And because you don't say it, it doesn't mean that you don't believe it. I think there's a difference between just not using it the term, not using black as an identifier every time you speak, and denying who you are. I think those are two different concepts. So if I decide that I walk into my classroom and I'm saying, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the school year. My name is Miss Simone. And that's it. And I continue with the lesson. I'll be your teacher for this course for the year. That's all that's relevant in that context. I don't think it's necessary for me to say, good morning, I'm Miss Simone. I'm your black teacher for the year. It doesn't matter at that point in time. I'm not denying my blackness. It's just not relevant in that particular situation. So no, I don't think it's oppressive. Again, depending on the context.
Appreciate you responding to that. We actually got a response back from the panelists. They explained their thought. I think it was aligned to what Jansen said. And so now let's just pivot this conversation a little bit more. Now we have the issues. George Floyd was kneeled on for 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Sorry, was 46?
46.
46 seconds. He died while in custody of the police, specifically white police officers. This was a trigger for many Black persons because we've seen this film on repeat. This is the longest franchise ever. That tops Fast and the Furious, if you get that joke reference. So now my question to you, panelists, in this context, does it matter whether you're Black first or Christian first in this context? Because, and I want to put all the things that you guys have said together. So this is kind of, I'll be honest, I'm trying to trap somebody. knowing that your identity shapes the way you view the world, which one matters more during this context? Who wants to take a stab at that?
No, you're trying to trap Phil. So let Phil go ahead and answer it. Let's be real.
I was about to say, you trying to trap me.
I mean, who wants to go at it first?
I'll go at it.
Yeah.
I think man, y'all be laughing, maybe forget my train of thought.
This context, is it more important to be Black or be Christian?
Yes. In this context, being Black matters, and it's not so much about me as it is about how others see me. Because while I may introduce myself as Simone, that's it, that's who I am, that's what's important to me. But as I said before, when I step outside the house, people are seeing more than just Simone. They don't know who Simone is. All they see is a Black female coming towards them. All they see is a Black person who's walked in for an interview. All they see is a Black person who stepped into a store. And that's all that's being used to decide how they are going to interact with me. So when you go out, if you've ever been I went to a work conference in Baltimore a few months ago, teachers from all over the country. And the first people I saw walking were actually some white women from like Wisconsin or something. I said, hey, started talking because they were educators, and that's what was important at that time. But you best believe when I walked into the convention center, I was like, so where are the people that look like me? Because that may be, you know, who I gravitate to become friends with, or who I'm going to try and, you know, spend some time with. So it's important.
So you're saying for now, it's more important to identify as Black. I'm gonna give Phil some time. I'm gonna go to everybody else. Courtney, during this time, which is it more important to identify as, Christian or Black?
I'm still standing firm, and there's no way you can separate it, because I think there are many Black non-believers who may feel a certain way, but I can't completely align my way of thought with them because of where I see myself as a Christian. And then vice versa. Like, there's a world of Christian people out there who have an approach to everything that's going on right now that that don't see my Blackness and don't know my experience as a Black person. So the way that we carry out our actions to, you know, combat white supremacy and police brutality are going to be very different. So unless I put both of those identities together, I'm never going to be able to really advocate best for myself in a time like this.
So then I think you make an argument for Phil's point, where if I'm already going to be identified as Black in the world, and Phil, please correct me if I'm wrong, and the world right now is struggling to know what it means to be Christian, isn't it more important than during this time to be adamant about the fact that you're Christian first, in order to make sure that there's a reframe around what it may even mean to be Black? And I'm wondering, Courtney, if you make an argument for that, like during this context, it's actually more important to be Christian first, to label your identity as being Christian first, and be very clear. You can be all the things, but in terms of labeling it, is it more important to label it as Christian first, though, in this context? Phil, do you think that supports your argument?
Yeah, I think that supports it. Because ultimately what I'm saying is that, yeah, I'm Black. And of course the world is gonna see me as Black. Like, I could have been George Floyd a few times in my life, right? And of course the world is gonna see this as another Black man being executed publicly by law enforcement, which is something that happens historically to Black people in America. But at the same time, what do we do as Christians? Do we say, well, I'm gonna be Black first and I'm gonna kind of just discard my Christianity for the moment and say Black Lives Matter? Or am I gonna fight this case of a public execution of a Black man just like I would any other injustice in the world? How am I gonna fight this thing that we call evil, we call sin? Because that's all it is. And I think all of these identifiers just serves to divide, even though it's necessary to understand like roles in life and like different structures and so forth. But ultimately, what we are striving to do as Christians is be like Christ. So I think that in this specific situation, you gotta kind of mold the two, man, because there's no way to delineate or to separate the two.
I hear you. So then, my panelists, how do we approach this time, man? Because we look at our churches, and many churches around the world that are segmented, right? With any denomination in America, with exceptions to a few, you have persons in those churches who rarely congregate together, because apparently in America, being a race matters. So I need y'all help in this, because I think I agree with everyone that really it matters to be an integrated sense of self, right? You need to reach a point of consciousness that when you say something, it is more so in mind of what context you're in. So you make sure people understand not to see you as less than because of that. So in an all-white conference, it might be important to say, hey, I am a Black teacher. Or if it's an educating conference, so they recognize, like, don't think I'm less than because this is an all-white venue, an event. But in a world like ours today, how do we approach the nuanced life of identity when our churches and racism is still prevalent and we have issues like that of George Floyd? I need your help in this.
Can you hear me? Because I put on some headphones, so
Yeah.
I don't know if. Okay, so yeah, all of a sudden there was all this noise in the ambient noise, but no, I think in 2020 in this moment, I think we take a look back at history and understand that the Christian faith that people of African descent adopted, and I don't even want to say adopted, it was forced on them, but ironically, they came to a closer, more intimate, accurate understanding of like the message there. One of obviously love, one of redemption, one of resurrection, and like, but it also gave people of African descent a sense of dignity, a sense of identity, a sense of significance in the fact that like they found that they were of God there. I mean, look at the Negro spirituals. Like the most common one, he got the whole world in his hands. I mean, this was something that came about at a point where they were completely subjugated. They then used the fuel that this understanding of God gave them to become literally Christian soldiers marching onto war to end slavery, to end segregation, to call America out for its original sin and to get equality as God's children. I mean, so I think that identity, if we actually understand it as a Black Christian, is one where you're going to fight. Like, look at the civil rights movement. That was started by people of faith. Look at I'll shut up, but Sojourner Truth. Harriet Tubman, who was called Moses, who her people had called her Moses. Like, these people understood this stuff on a deeper guttural level that forced them to react to the world in a way where they were like, we're going to fight to make it better, not just for me, but for whoever.
I appreciate that. Anyone else want to share? I think that was deep. Courtney, Simone. All right. So seeing that we understand that identity is nuanced and subtle, where do we go from here? Like in general, I mean, the platform of F.L.O.W, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share when you see it. We believe in creating these conversations, these spaces where we can address real things and deep things. We're all about access. And where do we go from here, right? Because that idea of shaping how you approach things, I think, has tempered many people, right? I see you, Phil. I'll go right to you after that. So as Christians, I guess a lot of the young adults that I'm around got annoyed because it's like, yo, Christian doesn't mean sit quietly and only pray on the matter, right? And so we got fed up, and we're trying to figure out now. I see you, Jansen. You agree? Like, where to go? Like, where do we go? How do we approach this? I'd like to hear maybe how some of you have been reconciling what it has been pushed on you to be Christian versus how you are choosing to live out your Christianity. I'll start off with you, Philip.
Yeah, no, like if I were to go out and say that I am a Black Christian, then automatically all I'm doing is talking to other Black Christians or Black people that might be interested in becoming Christians. So now I'm excluding white people just in general, whatever they identify with. It doesn't matter at that point, because they're automatically going to say, turn that off. I'm not listening to him because this doesn't apply to me. And I think that defeats the purpose of what God called us to do. So we have to be careful, I think, the way that we go out and identify ourselves, because then if ultimately we're trying to spread the gospel, as I think all of us here are trying to do, then we have to be careful not to dismiss or distract from the message or the gospel that God wants us to preach.
Wow. So Philip, it almost sounds like you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that if we aren't careful about how we label our identity, we can become a distraction to the gospel, which is
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, Rob. And here's why. Because when you look specifically at the Adventist Church, why is it that we have white conferences and black conferences? Like, why did the Adventist Church have to say, you know what, y'all can't worship with us. We're going to give black people your own conference. Like, that's distracting from the message of the gospel in and of itself. So, which when other people look at it, they'll say, if they're like really into history and they look at the Adventist Church, they're going to say, well, I don't want to join that because you guys can't even get it right. And you apparently believe in the Bible and all the principles that it teaches. And you can't find unity within the Bible. So how are you a Christian again? And so now they're gone. So what do we?
Okay, I want to hold that because I see Simone, and we do have a question. So I'm gonna go to Simone because she's chomping at the bit. I guess in response to what you were saying, and actually I don't mean that as an insultive reference to any type of horses or anything. She's eager to respond. Let me be clear. Go ahead.
All horses matter.
We wear various hats, and the hat that we choose to put on at a particular time is important. If I am raging against the machine, and the machine being my conference, which is a multicultural conference, I'm going to put on my black hat and say, look, you guys say that we're one. You're saying that we are all working towards a common goal, but yet this situation has taken place, which affects individuals in your churches, and you're not addressing it. You need to do something. So at that point, my black hat needs to be put on. If I'm going out into the community now and I'm talking about unity, then my Christian hat would be put on, because that is what's necessary at that time. Now, I was biting my lip a little bit because, Phil, we're talking about black and white conferences and the need for them. We have to remember that this came about because the church was developed or birthed at a time when slavery was like legit happening, and then segregation. The black conference, it wasn't so much, it was about black pastors not being able to have congregations, to have churches to pastor. And that's how the black conferences came about. Was like, okay, so we need to give them a stepping stone. I think also we have to understand that the white conferences that exist is also about geography. So you go into a church, there's nothing saying that as a black person I can't walk into a church that is predominantly white. It may be predominantly white just because of where it's located. They may be accepting of me, or they may tell me that there's a church down the road that you may feel more comfortable attending. It really depends on where it is that you go. These are real things and issues I have with the church. But I think if we look at the larger context of like the black conferences and why they exist, is also because we're in America, where segregation was and is real. And that was a way for it to, for the church to grow.
Okay, we got, hold on. I'm gonna make sure I do my job as moderating. We got questions coming in from YouTube and extra. I know we're touching on a hot topic now. We still got 27 minutes to rock. So let me make sure our YouTube audience knows that we're hearing them. Somebody asked the question, and this is for, let's go to Jansen. Why do we have separate conferences? Yes, why do we have separate conferences?
I guess that question helps me. That question helps me, I guess, directly respond to Simone. Like throughout these 3 panels, I've literally agreed on everything with Simone, but I think I slightly disagree there. If you look at the history of how the church, these conferences were started, it was, yes, segregation, but it was because of racism as well. They did not want to relinquish power, and the separate conferences was a compromise that came about as a result. This was a group that when they started, I'm talking about Adventists in the early 1840s, when they started, they were strongly pro-abolition, but they weren't necessarily anti-racist. They still held on to a lot of racist thought, which is why then they came up with this. They didn't have the strength. These are the people that purported to be this remnant, that purported to have this truth, and yet they didn't have the strength to say, you know what, all men are created equal in the image of God. Like, we're going to fellowship together. They didn't, because they're people with racists. And even if now that was 100% true, how and why it was necessary, it wasn't, but why it happened. Why in 2020 is that structure still in place? It is asinine and nonsensical. And it's from a church where we are literally still dealing with gender equality. So, I mean, there's a point where church stops being Laodicean and maybe ventures into a space called apostasy, but I don't know.
Okay, Courtney.
I agree with you, Jensen. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's what it was.
She wanted to make sure the alliance is still strong. Courtney, because I know this conversation has been heavily Adventist for a little bit, and you are Christian, you're not of the Adventist denomination. Let me ask you this. Do you think, and this is going to be a leading question for our next one that we have, do you think all Christians should be anti-racist? And how do you go about that process in a sense? You know, because there are a lot of Christians out there, and Jansen just kind of highlighted, even in our own church, like they were fully Christian. They were all for abolishing slavery, but as we know, you can be assimilationist, you can be anti-racist, or you can be racist. So can you be Christian and assimilationist? Can you be Christian and racist? Can you be Christian and anti-racist? What are your thoughts?
I think, those things can exist, but is it what God wants for us? And can you truly call yourself Christian if you are anything but anti-racist? No. And what was the second part of your question?
How do you go about that? Like, in your own walk, how have you been reconciling this idea that, there's Christians and I see what Phil, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by Phil over here.
I don't know what that means. Go ahead.
How have you chosen to approach the current climate as a Christian?
I think, a lot of things I've been thinking about is, as believers, maybe we are, well, I say maybe because it's something that I'm struggling with, but we are called to a higher power. And oftentimes we are going to have to be the ones to cross the aisle, and we are going to have to be the ones to have these difficult conversations with members of the church who are white. And I think that is something that sets us apart just from, if we're getting back to the identity piece, just of Black non-believers who would have a very hard time understanding why a lot of Black Christians on the surface seem much more forgiving or too lenient or too kind, if you will, to people who have not granted us the same decency. Mm-hmm. So I think it takes a lot to be a Black person and deal with the white church, if you will. But I think as people who are called to a higher power, that's what we have to do.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I asked that question because someone asked us, how does the Christian or Black identity affect our perceptions of protests and riots going on? I know I've been a part of a couple of conversations where some Christians are like, it's wrong to riot, that's stealing, you just can't do it, where others are like, with Black identity at the forefront saying like, nah, man, like riot, go ahead, kick rocks to all of it, so I think that's where this conversation stemmed from, because depending again on how you choose to live your identity, that shapes how you view some things.
When Moses took the people of that were in bondage, the Egyptians kind of got crushed in the Red Sea. When they went after Jericho, most of the the natives of Jericho got slaughtered, except for like Rahab. I'm not.
Ooh.
If you look at a lot of narratives in the Bible, when people fought against their oppressors, they again, they fought, and it wasn't just like, let me go out and hug you and forgive. I think here in 2020, we're a bit more modern. We're a bit more, we realize like just completely destroying everything is not always the best way. However, Dave Chappelle came out 2 days ago with like a 25-minute stand-up where he kind of just gave his thoughts on what was happening. And as a Black man and as a person who identifies with the Christian faith, I felt him on literally everything he said, which may not necessarily, you won't necessarily hear that coming from a pulpit. I mean, but again, going back to the gospel, like I want to touch on something else too. Like we've been talking about the Black church. I mean, about Adventism and race and Adventism, but I want to make sure you guys understand. You have evangelicals that try to perpetuate a racist system, but there have been Black churches since slavery that have AME, the AME church, for example. These were people that were at the forefront of the civil rights struggle. These are people that anchored their Christian faith in advocating for social justice, being anchors of the community lives. And I mean, so it was something that was wedded together. So I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. That is how those two things can exist together.
Simone, there was a question on Facebook, on YouTube, and I'd love if you can incorporate it with your response. Someone asks, what have we gained as Black Christians? And I'm going to also ask that person if they want to expound a little bit more, but their question is, what have we gained as Black Christians?
Yeah, I would love to know what they mean, because what are we supposed to gain as Christians? This isn't our home. So we're just here temporarily, and heaven is what we're all supposed to gain. So what is it that I'm supposed to be looking for as a Black Christian?
Can we pause the timer for a second? So they expounded a little bit, and let me make sure I want to get this. They also said they agreed with Jansen, but they said to some extent the ability to think critically. I'm guessing I responded and asked what did they feel we lost, and they said to some extent the ability to think critically. The fear of heaven or hell has crippled many of us into not asking questions, challenging the status quo, minimizing advocacy, and the spirit to fight back. So I guess if you look at the opposite end of that, they're kind of say then, what really have we gained as Black Christians? But they also, they agree with Jansen. So maybe Jansen touched on some of that, but Simone, hold up, Jansen. I want Simone to kind of now take that into your response.
I agree with that. And I think that also just has to do with time periods. If we look at an older generation, not only time periods, but cultural backgrounds. So the idea of protesting and rioting is going to look different for a 60-year-old who grew up, or 60, 70-year-old who grew up during segregation and Jim Crow, and a person who migrated to this country from elsewhere where racism wasn't an issue for them. So then their Christianity is to the forefront for the immigrant to just say, look, this has no place in the church. This isn't necessary. This isn't our home. We're just passing through. I'm looking, on the upward way. They, that is their thought behind it. While a Black American who experienced the civil rights movement, who knows what it means to not be able to sit in certain sections, they may say, look, I'm all for it. I protested when I was younger, and it's a necessity. I think for the younger generation, whether you were born elsewhere or you were raised here in America, because you see what has happened with George Floyd and Michael Brown and all these other individuals, it's about holding the church's feet to the fire and doing what we can to make sure this place is better for the time that we're here, because we understand we have to live here before going anywhere else.
And Simone, you bring up, actually, go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna add on to what Jansen was saying with regards to like when Moses brought the people of God out of Egypt and all of the other battles that God's people faced. They did so in a destructive manner. Like there's no civilization when it comes to, there's no being civilized when it comes to war. And to give like the reasoning behind that is because all of these nations that the Israelites fought and destroyed were trying to destroy them. These were evil people. And like I had said before in one of the other sessions, that the devil's primary purpose is to kill and destroy everything that looks like, feels like, sounds like God, period. And so that's what the Israelites represented. So all of these nations were trying to destroy them from the face of the earth. And so they had to dismantle and destroy all of these evil nations. And so is today. I'm with the protesting and the rioting. Destroy everything that represents evil and oppression, because if not, that's going to continue to exist in this world. And that's ultimately what God was trying to dispel from the world, evil, through his people. But if we don't, if we just say, well, let's just change the laws and let's try to live happily ever after, it's not gonna work, because the system is still in place.
Okay. All right. So Phil just gave me the charge. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with everything Phil just said.
Finally.
Yes, a new alliance is formed.
Yeah.
Forever.
So let's be real, guys. There's this. You see him on here, and he's like, "Oh, I'm Elder Phil. I'm saying all this rhetoric," but I see him on Instagram. So like that. So finally, we have the Phil from Instagram. But no, like to respond to the question that was posed, I think it's Simone touched on it, and again, I slightly disagree with Simone. I think the way we view how this world ends and our end time theology, it matters. So for too long, Christians have been like, oh, this earth is not our home. Let me get to my street of gold. Let me leave this godforsaken place. Let me cross the Jordan River. But throughout the Bible, it's replete with examples of that the earth, Jesus reconciled, the cross was reconciliation of all things. And in Revelations 21, verse 3, he's saying, behold, I am making all things new, new heaven and a new earth. And even within this particular denomination's end time belief, we're supposed to be in heaven for what? Like a 1,000 years? And then where are we? Here. We're here.
What are your words? That's fact.
Like we're here. And I think if we understood that we are here and that Jesus was preaching that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, then we would have an urgency when it came to advocating and fighting for justice, because we have to constantly be in this process of, if we're God's hands and feet, like making the earth new with every act. Every action that we do invites heaven or it invites hell. You see what I'm saying? And so if we think that, oh, this world, we'll soon leave it in the sweet by and by. No, in the sweet by and by, you will be here, and swords and spears will be melted into plowshares. Like,
wow. So Courtney, you've been quiet. We want to hear your thoughts on this, because now we're entering another kind of dynamic of this conversation. You know, they're basically saying that Christians are quiet because they're waiting for heaven. They're waiting for rapture, as it were. But I got two panelists here that's saying burn it all down and burn it all down now. So what are your thoughts, Courtney, on this?
I think that has been true for a long time, but I think there is just a little bit of a resurgence recently, because I think a lot of newer churches are taking a much different stance and challenging a lot of the previously existing structures. So I do have some hope in that, you know, people are taking more of an active stance and fighting against these structures. One thing that it makes me think about is the powers that we are going against as Black people are absolutely evil and demonic in so many different ways. How do we then discern between these white powers or people that are the evil ones and the ones that who may be believers and they may be what do we call them, assimilationists versus like active racists? Is there a spectrum of you know, white powers and white people that we're supposed to actively burn all down, or is it all of them? Is it, you know, which ones are we supposed to be fighting is something that I'm thinking about.
Wow. Simone, I see your hand.
Yeah, I feel I have to defend myself. First of all,
Wow.
I never said not to burn the whole ish down. What I was giving, if you guys listen carefully, see, this is why I'm a teacher. You guys only hear what you want to hear. I gave the examples of other people, right? And said, no, but on a serious note, I just want to make that clear. I believe that protesting is very important. But looking at the broader picture, there are some people who are against it as Adventists, as Christians. And that's because they're using this ideology that this earth isn't our home and we shouldn't get involved in certain things. And that's why I said it's important that we hold people, our church, our conference, or whoever it is, hold their feet to the fire and say, look, what are you doing? Because as much as you want to act like this isn't important, that could have been one of the young men from your church who was George Floyd. How many times have your young men been pulled over by police and you don't want to acknowledge it, right? You just want to sit and pray, but nobody's putting money together to get them bailed out or to make sure they have a good lawyer and that they can be properly defended. You know, you just want to say, oh, we're just going to pray about it. You know, it's almost like when tornadoes or hurricanes come in, like thoughts and prayers for those in New Orleans, but you're not doing anything else. Thoughts and prayers for George Floyd's family, but I'm not doing anything else. God expects us to do something. We have to, he's holding us responsible beyond thoughts and prayers.
We have about 9 minutes left, and I want to incorporate both what Courtney said and what you said just now, Simone. But I'll do that after Jansen. Yeah.
No, so my eldest daughter's name is Simone. So I guess that was a bit of this is a glimpse into what my future life is going to be like when she's going to be checking me. But no, so I agree. But I wanted to quickly touch bases with what Courtney said. She brought up a very intriguing point, like how do we delineate what we're breaking down, what we're taking down in terms of like even individuals. So please understand, I'm not advocating for going out and slaughtering millions of people. Like I'm talking about destruction of systems. Maybe there may be some bodies along the way, but I'm talking about systems. Now, let's be very real about something. In 2 weeks, we'll be celebrating America's Independence Day, which was a bunch of people that had they lost, they'd be viewed as terrorists. They were just rioters that were protesting a system of being colonists. They advocated against that colonial system. And in many ways, that's what people are rising up and doing. So the people that protested against the British, they weren't anti-British. They didn't want to kill the British, the English people. They wanted to be free. And I think this is the same parallel that we should focus on today. And hopefully that kind of like gives a little more light to your question.
Yeah, I think it does. Okay, I'm getting another, man, I feel like we're about to get real in this. I got a producer telling me stuff. Okay, at Phil, what do you think about the statement, this church is not our home, and yet no one wants to die and go to their home?
Said, this place is not our home, but nobody wants to die to go to the real home, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's facts. I think, yeah, this is not our home. And that's the argument that many Christians use to not fight for what is right, according to what the Bible says. The Bible that they use on their pulpits and in their homes to teach their families. Yet nobody wants to die to go to their real home. Why is that? That's something that I want people to think about. Like those who are watching, all right, if this world is not your home, then like, why not commit suicide? Like, why is that not a thought? You don't want to leave this world because there's something tangible that you want, something material that you want from this world. Yet you're mixing divinity with humanity. And there's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's like we have to be careful when we mix the two together in the wrong way. It's like a bad chemistry that people like a bad concoction that people put together. Yeah, I'll leave it at that because my time is up.
I see you on mic. You got a comment?
Oh, no, I was just saying that it goes back to a person's belief in what happens after a person dies. As Seventh-day Adventists, we don't believe that when a person dies, they go directly to heaven. Therefore, I wouldn't be in a rush to die because I'm not being directly translated to somewhere else. I'm then leaving my family behind. I'm leaving them to suffer. I'm leaving those who I care about. If your theology though is that when a person dies they go directly to heaven, then yes, it is a good question, and I ask it all the time. If if we're all trying to get to heaven, if it's this great place, then why aren't we all just jumping off buildings? But then comes the idea of suicide, and how does that play out in taking one's life, and have you then now committed the ultimate sin, which is a whole other conversation. So
Yeah.
I agree with Phil. It's a delicate topic.
All right, we're gonna wrap up, and I want to share on behalf of F.L.O.W that we also want to continue to increase our platform to make sure to use all that we believe God has given us to enhance His people. So I want to give Jansen another minute 25 to share about a project that I know you're working on and how maybe our watchers and our viewers can get involved.
Oh, thanks, man. So again, if you believe that this earth is our ultimate home, and if you believe that when Jesus was preaching that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and that means that gives us our mission to go out and to continue to do good and to fight injustice. I mean, then you want to get involved, and you can get involved in so many ways. One of the ways that I'm involved, I'm involved in my county's chapter of the NAACP. We're focused on environmental justice, alleviating food pockets, places where you have food deserts, and showing our people how to eat healthy, nutrient-dense foods. My church that I attend, which is a diverse church, New Hope SDA in Fulton, Maryland, big up. They reached out to me because they heard what we were doing, and they said, I already managed their garden, and they were like, hey, can you expand the footprint so we can also join and be on mission? So I think that project is a good example of how my identifying as Black and my identifying as Christian, like they reconcile together. So over the past several weeks, we've expanded the footprint and we now have it tilled. We have soil amended and we're planting. There's a huge planting session tomorrow. And again, these foods will go to help out people impacted by COVID, as well as showing people in the African-American community the importance of sustainability.
Okay, I just want to make sure for everyone watching, that is New Hope SDA Church in Fulton, Maryland. Please, if you need the address, look it up.
What time?
Yeah, what time?
Oh, it's early, 7:30 in the morning. Rise and shine.
7:30. For my Sunday worshipers, y'all should already be up and getting prepped. Come on now. 7:30.
And you come and worship in nature. Psalms 19 says the heavens declare the glory of God. So
Pastor Jansen out here. Hey guys, as we are now going to wrap up, I'd like to kind of leave this thought with you. I know the young adults that I work with firmly believe in essentially all of that you guys were sharing, which is that one, the system needs to be teared down. As it is currently structured, it is allowing for oppressive mentalities to be reproduced. And we believe that that is anti-Christ and anti-Christian, and it's not anti-racist. And so I know the young adults that I coordinate with, we believe in tearing it down. Hence why F.L.O.W is having these conversations. Secondly, I encourage everyone to reach a sense and level of consciousness of self, where how you identify always corresponds to who you are. And that may mean a resequencing, as it were, based on your context. Being conscious of self allows you to do so. And lastly, I think we should absolutely ascribe to be Christ-like above all else, that we should push ourselves to be Christian, because that really that always lends to right. I know Phil has been talking about that. Courtney's alluded to that always lends to right. But it also means sometimes that you have to strap on your sword to your thigh and got your word in your other hand, okay? Sometimes that means that walls will fall, giants will tumble, right?
Will be.
Will be divided, and whole peoples will be lost. The Bible, God was the first one to respectfully and rightfully engage in genocide, but that's a whole other conversation. Everything that God does is just, I don't know, I'm talking about too much right now. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. F.L.O.W is more than a mission. It is a movement. Our conversations going forward from today are now going to be about how to get involved. If you have a small business, if you have any type of activity that you're a part of, let us know. Reach out to F.L.O.W, put it in the comment box. You could email myself, Rob Harris, 0204 at Gmail about your ideas, because we'll put it out there. We want to support everybody. We'll try every week to put out something that you can support and get involved in. Again, tomorrow you see on the slide, 7 a.m. New Hope. Oh man, they did Black folk dirty. Nah, they did 7 a.m. because they know people are going to arrive late. 7 a.m. New Hope SDA Church planting session in conjunction with the NAACP. Address is 12350 Hall Shop Road, Fulton, Maryland. That's 12350 Hall Shop Road, Fulton, Maryland at 7 a.m. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Peace out. God bless.